At the end of Season 1, we meet Bobby Singer, and for unknown reasons, he had a falling out with John. The only detail we get is that he ran John off with a shotgun. While the series never explains further, a spin-off book of Bobby's journal does. One day, the Winchesters showed up on my doorstep and Dean had a gun in his belt. He was 12 years old. I'd known that the boys knew how to shoot. Hell, I'd taken them out back for target practice myself. But that was too far. I tried to talk to John about it, but he wouldn't hear it. "They need to know the truth about what's out there, Bobby," he said to me. "I need to make sure they're ready." He trained those boys like they were Navy SEALs. Dean was more excited about it, but Sam was a good shot, too. They were well-versed in all kinds of monster lore. They knew the difference between a ghost and a poltergeist. A poltergeist can move stuff. They could field strip a rifle in 30 seconds. They also never really got a chance to be kids. John left them with me to go on a hunting trip to Montana, said he would be gone a week. After 10 days, I started to get worried. He had a cell phone by that point, but he wasn't answering it. The boys were old enough to tell I was worried, but I played it off. Told them that I'd spoken to John and that he'd be back for them as soon as he could. Secretly, I started calling hospitals and morgues all over Montana, seeing if his body had turned up somewhere. After 2 weeks, I started calling every hunter I knew to see if anybody could go up there to check in on him. I couldn't leave the boys alone. That'd make me as bad as John. Nobody was available. The 90s were busy years for hunters. All I could do was keep waiting. It was summer, so the boys weren't in school. I did my best to keep them occupied, to keep them from asking too many questions about where John was and when he was coming back. Sam was the worst, since he was littler and still naive. He'd believe any lie I told him, but it killed me to do it. After a month, I accepted the fact that John was dead. Figuring out how to tell Sam and Dean was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, and I hated John for making me do it. I sat them down in my living room, but couldn't even bring myself to say the words. I had tears in my eyes when I finally said it. "Boys, your dad's not coming back this time." Sam was so in shock, he couldn't even cry. Dean, he screamed at me. Called me a liar, told me that John was too tough to die, that he was just busy with a case and he'd be home soon. I wanted to say, "You're right, Dean. I'm sure he'll be back soon." I couldn't. I had to tear the bandage off, make Dean understand that holding out hope for John's return would only make things worse. Dean and I have never argued that bad since. He was screaming, pounding on my chest, cursing me out for not having any faith in John. All the while, Sam just sat there, silent, taking it all in. I went too far. In trying to make Dean understand, I said things about John I couldn't take back, things that no son should ever hear about his father. I said John was an idiot, a damn fool for chasing the thing that had killed their mom, and that they'd be better off having been put in an orphanage after Mary died rather than being dragged around by John. Every bad thought I'd ever had about him I let out right then and there. Dean stormed off, disappeared into the forest by my house. For 10 hours I waited for him to come back. As I contemplated having to call the police to help find him, I realized just how much Dean was like his dad, and that Dean's reaction was just his way of processing what he must have known to be true, that John really wasn't coming back. I'd made things so much worse than they needed to be, and poor Sam, smart enough to know exactly what was happening, but shy enough to bear it all in silence. God only knows the pain he was feeling. At midnight, I heard footsteps on my front steps. When I opened the door, there was Dean, holding John Winchester's hand. He was alive. And when he returned, he found his son on the side of the highway, trying to hitch a ride to Montana to look for him. When John saw me, there was ice in his eyes. He was so furious at me for what I'd said to Dean and Sam, he could have sucker-punched me. He called out for Sam, who was asleep on the couch, said they were leaving, going to stay with some real friends. I told you I wasn't proud of what I said to Dean, but I'm also not that proud of what I did next. I grabbed a rock-salt shotgun from my shelf and chased John off my property, blasting the back of the Impala with salt as it skidded out of my driveway. I spent the next few years regretting what had happened. Hunting can be a lonely life, and it was a lot lonelier without the Winchesters. I may put on a gruff exterior, but everybody wants a family. That's what John had, and I felt like he was throwing it away.